At the beginning of time, golf was a pastime for the rich and famous. Once banned by King James II in 1457 for being a distraction to learning archery, the game has always had that addictive trait. As it progressed through time and started making its way around the world, the stigma of a rich man's game travelled with it. It wasn't until the 1950s that the brand of golf would change, and that change was mainly down to one man. In 1929, in the small borough of Latrobe, Pennsylvania, Doris and Milfred Palmer gave birth to their little boy, Arnold Daniel Palmer. In a town made from the steel industry, options for work were slim. However, Palmer's upbringing was different from everyone else's, and his start on life was going to be mapped out right from the very start. His father, Milfred, hadn't had the easiest of starts in life, but he never let any of that get in the way. After suffering from polio since a young boy, he still managed to accomplish his dreams in becoming the head professional and greenskeeper at Latrobe Country Club. Because of his father's profession, Arnold was able to escape the normal path he would have been destined to go down. Young Arnold had all the facilities he could ask for: unlimited balls and a golf coach he had dinner with every night. With an edge on most golfers in the country, and with a candle full of passion that never blew out, Arnold began dominating the junior scene throughout Pennsylvania. He took home every piece of silverware there was to be had, and at a time before social media, Arnold's name was spreading fast. When it came to choosing a college, Arnie knew if he was ever going to make it as a professional, he would need somewhere that he could play as much as possible. Back then, golf scholarships were very hard to come by, and the chances of getting in were even slimmer. In 1948, Wake Forest College landed a huge recruit for what was, at the time, a very small intercollegiate golf program. Buddy Warsham, whose older brother Lou had won the US Open the following year, was coming to Wake Forest on an athletic scholarship. However, before the deal could be finalised, Warsham had one final request. Could a good friend come with him? Can he play golf? Asked Jim Weaver, the Deacon's athletic director at the time. As it turns out, Arnold Palmer could. When he arrived on the old campus in the fall of 1948, Palmer simultaneously launched a collegiate golf dynasty on one of the greatest careers the game has ever known. He became Wake Forest's first individual NCAA champion in 1949, then was the NCAA individual medalist again in 1950. With the help of a friend, Palmer was given a pedestal in which he could perform the highest level of golf in the country. Sadly though, in 1950, the fate that brought him there tragically had to leave us far too early. On October 14, 1950, Palmer's best friend Bud Warsham died in a one-car automobile accident that also claimed the life of Gene Shear. The two men had travelled to a Durham hotel that night to attend Wake Forest's homecoming dance, but Palmer and friend Flick decided to remain on campus instead and went to a movie together. Palmer and Flick learned the following morning what had happened. The Buick Warsham and Shear had been riding in on the way home from the dance had skidded off a narrow bridge and landed upside down in a rocky stream bed, crushing both of them. Flick moved his things into Palmer's room the next night and they roomed together for the remainder of the semester. After losing his best friend, Palmer was never the same. He couldn't concentrate at college, and months later he dropped out to join the US Coast Guard. With his mind in a dark place, Arnold put his thoughts towards saving lives. He served his role from 1951 to 1954. After basic training at Cape May, New Jersey, which is still the basic training center for all the enlisted Coast Guard recruits today, Palmer received 9 months' orders to serve as a lifeguard on the center's recruits. While there, Palmer also taught the recruits physical education, including judo and how to use force when necessary. His next duty station was at the 9th Coast Guard District Auxiliary in Cleveland, Ohio, working at the Cleveland East Pier Head Lighthouse, which overlooks Lake Erie. While there, he was assigned as a photographer, taking military ID card photos for all the Coast Guardsmen in the district. During his service, golf was still very much the main goal, and he kept his game sharp by building a 9-hole golf course. He'd still win amateur competitions throughout Pennsylvania, but his big win would come when Palmer returned to Wake Forest to complete his studies. In 1954, Palmer won the US Amateur in Detroit and made the decision to turn pro in November of that year. He defeated 43-year-old Robert Sweeney 1-up in the 36-hole final. This was the turning point in Arnold's career, and this point he realised he could compete with the biggest names in the country. After winning that match, Palmer quit his job selling paint and played in the Wake Memorial Tournament in Shawnee-on-Delaware, Pennsylvania. There, he met his future wife, Winifred Walzer, and they remained married for 45 years until her death in 1999. On November 17, 1954, Palmer announced his intentions to turn pro. Straight away, there was a different halo around Palmer's head compared to the rest of the tour, and because of it, he began to stand out. Not only was Palmer a player rich in talent, his devilish good looks and charm, along with his emotion that he wore on his sleeve, was completely different from what we had seen. With golf now on TV, Palmer's involvement in a string of exciting finishes in early televised tournaments saw golf being shown in a new light that people had never seen before. In his 1955 rookie season, Palmer won the Canadian Open and earned $2,400 for his efforts. People loved his charisma, and the numbers he was bringing to the sport was a major factor in establishing golf as a compelling television event in the 1950s and 1960s, which set the stage for the popularity it enjoys today. The sport had its first celebrity, and there could have been no better man to do the job. With the whole country now watching, Palmer catapulted his celebrity status to new levels by winning his first major championship at the 1958 Masters Tournament. It was the 22nd Masters Tournament held April 3rd to April 6th at Augusta National Golf Club in Augusta, Georgia. Palmer, aged 28, was the third round co-leader and eagled the 13th hole on Sunday to propel him to victory as he three-putted on the final green. Three-time champion Sam Snead, aged 45, was the other co-leader after 54 holes, but shot a 79 7 over par on Sunday to fall into 13th place. Palmer beat runners-up Doug Ford and Fred Hawkins by one stroke, and with it saw him become a major champion for the first time and cashed a check of $11,000. Palmer had now established his position as one of the leading stars in golf, and while still being so young and the game itself having so much room to grow, Arnold was about to orbit into a different level of fame. At the start of a new decade in 1960, Palmer signed up as a pioneering sports agent to become Mark McCormack's first client. Mark had big things in mind for the sport, and he wanted Palmer to be the poster boy. But before getting his teeth stuck into Mark's vision, Arnold's own trajectory was taking care of itself. The 1960 Masters saw a young 20-year-old make the cut for the first time, and defending champion Ben Hogan put on a valiant defence. But it would be Palmer himself who birdied the final two holes to win by one stroke over runner-up Ken Venturi. With men wanting to be him and women wanting to be with him, Palmer's dominance was writing history itself. Months later at the 1960 US Open, Palmer, Ben Hogan, and new kid amateur Jack Nicklaus put on a spectacle that would go down as one of the greatest comebacks the game has ever seen. Palmer started the round 7 shots back of the leader Mike Suchak and several of the game's leading names. On the front 9, Palmer broke the record for the first 9 holes with a score of 30, scoring birdies on 6 of the first 7 holes. With Hogan collapsing with a 6 and a 7 on the last 2 holes, and Suchak shooting a 75, the last man with a chance was the amateur from Ohio, who did all he could, but Palmer's final round of 65 was far too good for the rest of the field, as he slung his cap into the air for another major win. With 2 of the year's majors going to Palmer, the Grand Slam might have ended there for most Americans. See, the modern definition could not be applied until at least 1934, when the Masters was founded, and still carried little weight in 1953 when Ben Hogan won the Masters, the US Open, and the Open Championship. That year it was impossible to win all 4 as the PGA Championship proceeded and overlapped with the Open Championship. The PGA's 36-hole match play semi-finals and finals near Detroit were the same days as the mandatory 36-hole qualifier at Carnoustie in Scotland for the Open Championship. The only way to compete in both events was to lose an early match at the PGA. Hogan is the only player to have won the Masters, the US Open, and the Open Championship in the same calendar year. Palmer had another vision for a modern-day Grand Slam, and is also credited by many for securing the status of the Open Championship among US players. Before Ben Hogan won that championship in 1953, few American professionals had travelled to play in the Open due to its extensive travel requirements, relatively small purse, and the style of its links courses. Palmer wanted to emulate the feats of his predecessors, Bobby Jones, Sam Snead, and Hogan, in his quest to become a leading American golfer. Whilst on the transatlantic flight to the Open Championship at St Andrews, Palmer came up with an idea that adding the Open and the PGA Championship titles that July would constitute to a modern-day Grand Slam. Bob Drum of the Pittsburgh Press spread the notion among the gathered media, and it began to gain traction. 2 years earlier, the PGA had changed to stroke play, and it started to be held 2 weeks after the Open Championship in 1960. Palmer travelled to Scotland in 1960 to compete in the British Open for the first time. He had already won both the Masters and the US Open and was trying to emulate Hogan's 1953 feat of winning all 3 tournaments in a single year. Palmer played what he himself said were the 4 best rounds of his career, shooting 70, 71, 70, and 68. His scores had the English excitedly claiming that Palmer may well be the greatest golfer ever to play the game. British fans were excited about Palmer playing in the Open, although he failed to win, losing out to Kel Nagle by a single shot. His subsequent Open wins in the early 1960s convinced many American pros that a trip to Britain would be worth the effort, and certainly secured Palmer's popularity among British and European fans, not just American ones. Palmer was greatly disappointed by his runner-up finish in the 1960 British Open. His appearance overseas drew American attention to the Open Championship, which had previously been ignored by American golfers. He may have been disappointed, but his hunger only grew stronger. In 1961 and 1962, Palmer would win back-to-back Open Championship titles. In 61, gale force winds caused scores to soar during the second round on Thursday, followed by heavy rains which washed out both rounds on Friday. Cancellation was a possibility, but the weather cooperated enough to play the third and fourth rounds in showers on Saturday. A final round of 72 was enough to clinch a one-stroke victory over Welshman Dyer Rees by 1 stroke at 4 under par. In 62, Jack Nicklaus, the US Open champion, competed in his first Open Championship. Following an Open round of 80, he rebounded with a 72 to make the cut and tied for 34th place. Palmer, however, after a slow start, switched gears in round 2 and 3 with a 69 and 67, followed by a 69 in the final round to win by 6 shots over Kel Nagle. With the next generation growing in confidence right behind him, Palmer's golden years may have already been seen. The last 3 years had been prolific for Palmer. 29 PGA Tour events, including 5 major tournaments in 4 seasons. In 1960, he won the Hickok Belt as the top professional athlete of the year, and also won Sports Illustrated magazine's Sportsman of the Year. He'd built up a wide fan base, often referred to as Arnie's Army, and in 1967 he became the first man to reach $1 million in career earnings on the PGA Tour. His final major win came in 1964 at the Masters. Palmer, aged 34, opened with 3 rounds in the 60s and led by 5 strokes after 54 holes at 10 under par. He carded a final round of 70 on Sunday to win by 6 strokes to become the first 4-time winner of the Masters and win his 7th major. Arnie never actually completed the modern-day Grand Slam, but came extremely close on 3 occasions. With 3 runner-up finishes and the baton now being passed down to the likes of Player and Nicklaus, Arnie's days were numbered, but it didn't stop him winning a PGA tournament every year from 1955 to 1971. He also won the Varden Trophy for the lowest scoring averages 4 times in 1961, 1962, 1964, and 1967. He played on 6 Ryder Cup teams and was the last playing captain in 1963, and captained the team again in 1975. Palmer was then eligible for the Senior PGA Tour from its first season in 1980, and was one of the marquee names who helped it become successful. He won 10 events on the tour, including 5 senior majors. As we come to an abrupt end, the Hall of Famer competed in the Masters tournament for the last time, marking his 50th consecutive appearance in that event. From hereafter, Palmer served as an honorary starter for the Masters, welcoming new generations of golfers to the first tee year after year. Retirement for Palmer was spent in the skies. Arnold's early fear of flying was what led him to pursue his pilot certificate. After almost 55 years, he logged nearly 20,000 hours of flight time in various aircraft, and on Palmer's 70th birthday in 1999, Westmoreland County Airport in Latrobe was renamed Arnold Palmer Regional Airport in his honor. Sadly, Palmer died on September 25th in 2016, shortly after his 87th birthday, while awaiting heart surgery. He was admitted 3 days earlier to undergo testing on his heart. After his funeral, he was cremated and his ashes were scattered in his hometown at Latrobe Country Club. His estate was valued at $875 million and was divided between his 2 daughters, his second wife, 8 employees, and his charity, and his army. Less than a week after Palmer died, his life was celebrated by both teams at the Ryder Cup at Hazeltine National Golf Club. The celebration included a video tribute and a moment of silence during the opening ceremony, which also included tributes from the opposing captains, Davis Love III for Team USA and Northern Ireland's Darren Clarke for Team Europe. During the matches, the players paid tribute to Palmer, which included wearing a special logo, button and pin. Palmer's bag from the 1975 Ryder Cup was also placed on the first tee as a tribute. Palmer had won more than 22 Ryder Cup matches and had also captained Team USA to 2 victories, in addition to holding or being tied for the records for youngest captain, most career single points, and most points in a single Ryder Cup. No one did more to popularise the sport than Palmer. His dashing presence single-handedly took golf out of the country clubs and into the mainstream. He transcended the game of golf. He was more than a golfer. He was an icon. He was a legend and a pioneer in his sport. He took the game from one level to a higher level, virtually by himself. The legacy was built and the career will be remembered. What this man did for golf was the stepping stone in which we all enjoy today. Without him, none of this would have been possible. As Mr. Palmer was finally laid to rest, he took one last flight through the skies above, finally being able to watch what he has created unfold beneath him.